Good afternoon. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order 1:30 p.m. on June 7th. It is our first meeting in the month of June this year. June is also recognized as National Indigenous History Month. So I will use this occasion to respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Jasper and Jasper National Park are located on Treaty 6 and 8 territories and Métis Region 4. This land is the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Denza, the Nihilwak, the Anishinaabe, the Secwepemc, Stoney Nakoda, and Métis. Each of them have a rich history in this area, and I invite everyone to use National Indigenous History Month as a catalyst to learn more about the Indigenous history of this area, which we now call home. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? If not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as circulated? Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. We have two sets of minutes to approve today. Firstly, the regular meeting minutes of May 17th, 2022. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Thank you, Councillor Kelleher MP. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And with respect to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 24th, 2022, are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, I would welcome a motion to approve those minutes as presented. Councillor Hall, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. From the minutes of the regular meeting on Tuesday, the 17th, we had a motion to direct administration to return to a future Committee of the Whole with a report in respect to, oops, that's the wrong one, with a terms of reference for a task force for the commercial use of public space. And I will just go to the, just want to make sure that we've captured that in the administration. Let me go to the end here, my apologies. In the administration reporting back to council.
Your Worship, I think Councillor Malik may be referring to the motion action list. And if so, I see that it's not there. I know that Emma has captured that and circulated. The work's already started, so we'll make sure that that's included in the list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for that. Any other business arising from the minutes of either May 17th or May 24th? Thank you. If there is no other business arising, we will move to agenda item 5, bylaws. We have a summary for information, and we have the taxation rate bylaw 2022 here for third reading, having received Parks Canada certification. So, Mr. Given, I take it no changes from second reading and no changes consequent upon certification by Parks Canada?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 248, the taxation rates bylaw 2022? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Is there any debate on the motion? I will then call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 5.3, the commercial use of public space bylaw is also here for third reading, having previously been read for the first and second time and having now obtained certification from Parks Canada. Again, Mr. Given, nothing to add to that?
No, Your Worship. The changes that were brought forward by council during the first or second reading were incorporated. That's what was forwarded to Parks, and so that's what's here for final.
And I would look then to a councillor prepared to make a motion that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 246, the commercial use of public space bylaw. Councillor Waxer, thank you. Is there any debate on that motion? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And that takes us to agenda item 5.4, the emergency management bylaw. Also here for third reading, having previously received first and second reading and certification from Parks Canada. Same status, I take it, Mr. Given?
Your Worship, I think it is. There was an additional step that administration undertook to circulate the draft bylaw to the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. There were a couple of small revisions that came as a result of that. I know that Chief Conte is on Zoom with us as well. Council had any discussion about the specifics or about the bylaw in general. He's going to be our subject matter expert on this, but I can highlight to Council where those changes are. Under section 3.7, the Alberta Emergency Management Agency recommended some clarifying wording to ensure that there's consistent interpretation of the bylaw with respect to who can declare a state of local emergency. And there was some additional rationale related to that in removing section 3.1 as it was addressed in 3.7, so it was essentially redundant. So that's been section 3.11 has been removed. Section 3.7 has been slightly clarified. And then there's a proposed change in section 8.3 to improve clarity around to what extent the Director of Emergency Management can delegate their authority, and really just to identify that it's just to one level below it, not that it can be delegated and then further delegated by its delegates. So there's just a little bit of clarity. I don't think they're material changes, but just improving clarity and ensuring that the bylaw passes the test with our provincial partners in this case as well. As I said, Chief Conte is here if Council had any other questions about the bylaw. If not, this has received, as you said, Your Worship, certification from Parks Canada and would be ready for third and final reading.
Thank you for that. Mr. Given, might I just confirm that will the order of certification and the order of the changes, the conversation with provincial authorities happen before the final text went to?
Yes, Parks Canada? I believe so.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors to Mr. Given or Mr. Conte regarding those slight changes to the proposed bylaw? If not, then is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to give third and final reading to bylaw number 247, the emergency management bylaw as presented? Councillor Waxer, thank you. Is there any debate? Seeing no show of hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6, request for decision. We have 4. We'll begin with 6.1, policy review. Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. This item coming from committee was first reviewed by council there at committee on May 24th. Where committee reviewed a list of policies that were being considered for removal, brought forward for removal by administration. Of the ones that were brought forward, committee chose to refer one Policy B017, the Community Economic Development Fund, to the 2023 budget discussion. Other than that one, the three that you see in front of you are the ones that committee recommended could be removed. Those are C002, the electronic communication device policy, C003, the no smoking zones policy, and D005, the laptop policy. Just in terms of a brief overview, each of those items are either covered under provincial legislation, that will apply to C002 and C003, where provincial legislation addresses the subject matter of those policies, and the municipal policies essentially get superseded by that provincial legislation. And then the laptop policy is covered under another policy area of B004, Council Member Compensation and Benefits. And because those policies essentially are either covered under other legislation or in other municipal policies, they are appropriate candidates for formal removal by council. Recognizing that policies are council policies, only council has the authority to formally remove them by motion at a regular council meeting. Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions on the policies or the content of the RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Demoda.
Ready to move with committee recommendations. I move the council rescind the following policies: C002, electronic communications device policy, 003, no smoking zones policy, and D005, laptop policy.
Just for clarity, I heard C at the end, but D?
D,
Okay.
as in Demoda.
Correct. C is incorrect. Is there any debate on the motion? Okay. I will then call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 6.2, relationships with external groups. Mr. Given, you're nodding to your right. Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So as discussed and recommended from committee, the item before you is relationship with external groups policy. And the committee recommendations are that council rescind policy F004, relationship between the municipality and the Jasper community team, and that council approve policy F-104, relationship with external groups policy. The background, there are alternatives, of course, should council suggest amendments or suggest this going back to committee. The background, back in September of 2021, committee directed administration bring forward recommendations, which we did to last committee meeting. And this policy was drafted based on the feedback received previously. Council discussed it at committee and did not bring forward any recommendations for amendments. And so the policy is presented for council approval today. Of course, answer any questions should there be.
Thank you, Director Reid. Are there questions for Mr. Reid regarding the rescission of one policy and the new policy, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, and forgive me if it's pretty straightforward, but the reason we're rescinding policy F004, the relationship between the municipality and the Jasper community team, is that the new policy that's presented is more encompassing and leaves the previous policy kind of redundant.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Wilson, that is absolutely correct. So the previous policy was very specifically only to the one case, the Jasper Community Team Society. This policy would absolutely apply to the Jasper Community Team Society, as well as any other group we should entertain partnership with or collaboration with.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Waxman.
In reading it over, one thing that struck me was potentially the ensuring that the organizations that we work with have up-to-date status. But then I realized that could probably be fit under the roles in writing, that we may be able to then articulate that. That's just one thought that crossed my mind as I read it.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Waxer, that's also correct. One of the benefits of the partnership model in this case is that we would articulate all the requirements that we need. One of those requirements, of course, is that we need to have a legal entity that we're working with in most cases. So yes, that's where that would be caught and would be contained in this partnership agreement.
Wonderful, thank you.
I wonder, Mr. Reid, whether I might inquire, and I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago and neglected to ask this question. But in terms of, say, a relationship, an ongoing relationship, such as our sister city relationship with Kakoni, where do you see that falling? We have a formal document, which I would think is beyond an MOU. But for relationships such as that, would they fall into this template at all?
Your Worship, I believe they would. That unique relationship would definitely apply in certainly this staff labor. And then depending on what budget item you would have in your annual budgeting process. So there would definitely be, should there be a reciprocal agreement such as hosting between yourselves and your equivalents across the ocean, then that would be made clear, again, following this policy, so that all parties would know exactly where we stand on deliverables and commitments.
So any one relationship might fall under more than one of these color-coded?
Yes, Your Worship. Yes, definitely. There are, we can think of examples where we have a lease, but we also might have a service agreement. And so there would be 2 times. There's also times where we might be giving facility booking space at a discount or a reduced rate to a partner that we already have a different agreement with. So yes, there are many cases where we can see, pardon me, several lines may apply.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm still getting myself familiar with the structure that's been presented, but it looks like it covers just about every conceivable relationship we have or might have or have had. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Reid? Councillor DeMora.
I was just wondering, after this is and when it's official, if we can get a little laminated things that will fit into our folks that come in really handy for reference. I love the layout.
Your Worship, through to Councillor DeMota, we can certainly provide any tools that any councillor might need. You will know that our intention will be to reference the policy anytime it does come to you. It will be clearly laid out why and how it connects to the policy. So perhaps the cheat sheet is not necessary yet, but should it be, we would absolutely provide
that. If there are no other questions for administration generally or Mr. Reid in particular, is there a councillor prepared to make the motion? Councillor Waxer? Your motion is that council rescind policy F004, relationship between the municipality and the Jasper community team, and that council approve policy F104, relationship with external groups policy. Is there any debate on that motion? That wonderfully worded motion. Councillor Waxer?
Thank you so much.
I will call the question then. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. On behalf of myself and council, Mr. Reid, thank you for that work, and thank your staff. It really is an interesting approach to a dynamic question, but it seems to cover every conceivable. Yes, we will see, but it's work well done. So thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, Jasper Employment and Education Center, the letter of endorsement.
Your Worship, this is another recommendation from the committee. Director Reid can certainly speak to the details of the request. I know he's been working closely with the Jasper Employment Education Center. But on the 24th, the committee did discuss this, received a request from the center to provide a letter of endorsement to support an application for the rural renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. Mr. Reid, I think, in consultation with the center, will develop the attached letter, and the committee's recommendation was that council does provide that letter of support.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions, Mr. Kivin or Mr. Reid? Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Reid. This is a critical last step in obtaining the designation for the community to access this program, I believe. Will there be any funding requirements from the municipality in order to support this program at this time that you may be aware of?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick, no, there are not any funding requirements. This program, or this particular facet of this program, is simply to get our community recognized as, I guess, open to this program or accepting of the program. The work required to support it is contained within our work anyway, so there's nothing that changes in budget due to this.
Thank you for that.
I have but one question. It seems to me that when this matter first arose, in correspondence we received from Ms. Marcoux, there was an indication that our letter of support had to indicate the person in our organization who could field questions. Does the intent to have this signed by the mayor imply that the mayor is going to field the questions?
Your Worship, sort of. The intention is that you, on behalf of council, do need to sign it, and you would field the question by way of forwarding it to the appropriate administrator, which usually will be the CAO. But yes, so that is a requirement. We could have put a bracketed thing that said for administrative details contact, but they're going to contact you anyway, and this meets the requirements of the program. So, but you are entirely, and we are expecting you to forward that should come.
All right, so you are satisfied though that the format of this letter, without referencing the contact person, but putting my name and contact information, is sufficient to meet the particular requirement of the rural renewal stream?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. If there are not further questions for administration, again, I would look for a motion from a councillor. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Island. I would recommend that council provide a letter of endorsement for support. Sorry, I'd like to take a motion that council provide a letter of endorsement and support for the Jasper Employment and Education Center in respect to the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program Rural Renewal Stream Community Designation Application.
Thank you for that. Is there any debate on that motion? I will then call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And that takes us to agenda item 6.4, Jasper Canada Day Committee request for support. Who is leading that?
Your worship, that'll be Director Reed again, I think, but this also comes from an item of correspondence that was received on the 24th, and the committee's recommending support for the request. Director Reed has, I think, captured a couple of other items to bring forward to committee's attention, or sorry, to council's attention, that are contained in the committee recommendations. If there are any other questions, council certainly can ask Director Reed and myself. The additional item is the one that is captured there under additional recommendation. And maybe Director Reed, I'll let you speak to the past history around the pancake breakfast fundraising component and why the recommendation is what it is.
Thank you very much, CEO Gibbon and your worship through to council. The short answer, the Caring Community Fund was recommended this year due to the fact that in the absence of crisis team support clarity, our group, through funding from the Caring Community team, has seen an added burden upon that fund. And so we are looking to say if there are net proceeds, that fund would be a natural fit for it this year. I think that's all I would add to this presentation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I do have a question about, I'm not quite sure, is the pancake breakfast also going to be now at Commemoration Park, or is that still going to be at Centennial?
Thank you, your worship, through to Councillor Hall. That is correct, and that would be the one thing that I should have also mentioned. So typically, or in past practice, the pancake breakfast was at the log cabin in Centennial Park. Due to the organization this year and some real operational efficiencies that we, as well as the Canada Day Committee, see, we are intending to have everything occur at Commemoration Park this year. So the pancake breakfast, as well as many of the other events, will be Commemoration Park this year, and that's an excellent catch. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Hall, would you like to make a motion? Or sorry, just Councillor Wilson?
Please.
Yes, I would make that motion that council approve that the municipality of Jasper facilitate the pancake breakfast on Canada Day with funding coordination, execution, and including staffing and volunteers. And that the municipality, in addition, donate venue space, including Commemoration Park and the multipurpose room at the Activity Center for June 30th, July 1st, and 2nd for setup and tear down. And also that council approve the net proceeds from the breakfast to be donated to the Caring Community Fund this year.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Melman.
Thank you. It just struck me that I agree with the motion, and the previous item that we just dealt with, or a previous item, would mean that this wouldn't normally come to council in the future. And I just would maybe like to get some clarity for that we all are under the same understanding. That I think we've done a very good thing with the policy and how we deal with groups, and it gives administration a lot more the definition as to what comes to council, what doesn't, and helps us get back to groups more quickly for them to be able to make their plans.
Thank you for that observation. Any other debate or comments about the motion? So there are three. No need to split them, I presume. So I will call one question, and it will apply to all three components of the motion. All those in favor? There are none opposed. Those are all carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 7, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. Firstly, item 7.1, a letter received from Parks Canada regarding the private home accommodation draft policy. Mr. Gibbon, did you wish to speak to that at all?
Your worship, just to acknowledge that it was received back May 20th, and so it was sent by email. The municipality was copied along with all other stakeholders. Parks Canada has announced that they're withdrawing their proposed amendment package, and that they're expecting to undertake further consultation, which I would imagine they would introduce their approach to doing that to council and the community over the next while. But just essentially notice that Parks has withdrawn that package. Believe Parks continues to be interested in addressing that issue. It's going back to the March 2019, but they have committed to take a different approach to the consultation. Of course, municipal administration isn't aware of what that might look like, but we would expect that the municipality would be copied as a stakeholder as Parks undertakes that work.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Wilson.
If there's any change in the hiatus on issuing new PHA permits, and is there any movement on that with this new development? Are new applicants still in the waiting room?
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, Parks did not share whether there's any change to the status of the moratorium on new applications. And so in the absence of anything saying that the status of that moratorium has changed, I think we would have to assume that it continues. But that is hasn't been addressed by Parks and Correspondence.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, no.
Any other questions then regarding the letter from Parks Canada? Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, I was just trying to put my thoughts together. I find it I find it unfortunate that any new applicants are now just in a lurch, waiting for who knows how long. Is it overstepping for the municipality to request that Parks Canada is it the moratorium? No, lift the moratorium under the new suggested guidelines. They had previously been approving new PHAs with the new interpreted guidelines, such as a 10% square or 10% gross floor area. It just I feel like we need to support our community in the fact that we could be waiting on this for years. There's just no real kind of dates or deadlines to the letter that we've received, and for our development office to or for land use and planning to move ahead, as it should. I don't think that there should just be a hard stop to issuing PHA licenses.
I appreciate those comments, Councillor Wilson. I would prefer personally to not make a request of that direct nature without some further study and potentially a meeting with Parks Canada to understand where they may think the process is going now. It's a difficult issue. I agree that I don't feel that I have sufficient facts from their perspective to understand what that recommendation would mean, nor do I understand really what it would mean for applicants if they were to be approved under conditions that generally were unacceptable at the community level. I'm not sure that I would be comfortable recommending that they impose those against some people, but not all. To me, it's fraught with danger, but I'm quite happy to carry on the conversations with Parks Canada to find out where this might go. Any other councillors? Interesting. Right, if there is nothing else on that, the next piece of correspondence is a report from the RCMP.
Your Worship, I can speak to that. I won't speak to all of the detail in the report, but just remind Council that this is a regular item. The RCMP are providing quarterly updates to Council and the community. So they have provided the fourth quarter. I think that may be the first quarter of 2022. So I certainly we can check with Sergeant Badesi on his intent there, but this is the most recent report from the detachment. The things that stood out from an administrative perspective were really around staffing. The report identifies that the detachment is fully resourced. So I think this is the first time in these reports that they've been able to do that. And so there are 9 established positions for police officers. They have 10 working, which was interesting to see that there's one where there's currently 2 people assigned to the position. So it appears that they're have additional resources in that area, which I think is a good thing. Maybe a person shouldn't question it too much, but they are fully resourced in the police officer area as well as their detachment support. So I think that's a positive indicator. Other than that, the statistics are provided there for Council's information, as well as some additional information about ongoing national initiatives with respect to the addition of body-worn cameras for RCMP officers and a new RCMP, Alberta RCMP app that's available for smartphones. So all that is there for Council and community's information, and administration would be happy to further explore any issues that Council wish to direct us to make inquiries. Sergeant Badesi about.
Are there questions from any councillor or Mr. Given to take back to Mr. Badesi regarding the report? Councillor, no.
Thank you, Your Worship. About bringing something back to Sergeant Badesi, I see, you know, in the last 5 years, one particular stat that's quite troubling is spousal abuse. And the reason I bring that one up, because that probably would have some impact as well to municipal resources, supporting RCMP efforts. And I'm just wondering if there's any feedback from the RCMP as to why this spike compared to the last number of years.
That's certainly something we could ask Sergeant Badesi about. And also, I think a part of that question would be whether this trend is consistent with other Alberta detachments or if it's something unique to Jasper. But certainly that's something that we could follow up and ask Sergeant Badesi to provide some information on.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick? Any other questions? Not necessarily for Mr. Given, but for Mr. Given to take back to Sergeant Badesi. Councillor Axel.
It's actually not a question, but Sergeant Badesi at one of the community conversations spoke to the spousal abuse piece, and I believe that he indicated that the majority of the spousal abuse was cases were occurring in visitors to the community and not in the community itself. That the added stress of traveling seemed to cause some challenges. But I think it's still worth asking.
Thank you for that additional information. Somewhat comforting. Councillor Wilson.
My apologies to do this, but the brain operates a little slow. Is it possible to return back to 7.1 to just make a brief request? Or should I bring up my request in new business?
When we complete 7.2,
yeah,
I will allow you to return to 7.1.
Okay, yeah.
And we might be completed 7.2. I'm not sure. Is there anything else with respect to the RCMP report? I might just suggest, Mr. Given, that if Sergeant Bedaisy on future occasions is interested at all in presenting the report and making himself available, this could perhaps next quarter find its way onto the committee of the whole agenda rather than the council agenda. And Sergeant Bedaisy would always be welcome to come and speak with council. We've always found that quite useful in the past. Right, if there is nothing further on agenda item 7.2, we will allow Councillor Wilson to take us back to 7.1.
Yes, my apologies again. My only request, I think, because the moratorium has now been ongoing for about 2 years, and there was some movement forward, and then now the full brakes on the issue, it seems. I would just like to direct administration, or sorry, I'd like to make a motion to direct administration to inquire about the status of the moratorium on issuing new PHA licenses.
Thank you for that motion. Any debate on that motion? Do you wish to speak at all to the motion, or have you spoken enough? Great, I will call the question in. All those in favor? There are none opposed, that is carried. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. That takes us to agenda item 7.3, a request from Jasper, LGBTQA Society.
If I may, Your Worship, these three items do align with a schedule that administration would be able to propose before you approve or disapprove, or don't approve rather, any one of them. I believe it would be beneficial to consider them in the whole, all three of them together. How would it be okay if I presented this possible schedule now, or would you rather?
When you say all three, you mean 7.3, 7.4, and 7.5?
Yes, sir.
That's fair, because otherwise it's just the order that they're on the agenda that might decide the outcome.
That's correct. And so given what we know of council's goals and administrative policies, you have before you a request from Jasper to continue to fly the pride flag for all of June. You also will have a request to fly the Ukrainian flag, and you have a request to fly the Every Child Matters flag in reference to Indigenous Day on June 21st. So I should be clear, there's still other requests in the Jasper request that I think council would want to consider independently of what I'm proposing as far as the schedule goes. But the proposal that administration sees as effectively meeting all of the requests would be as follows: that the pride flag, which is currently flying, would remain up until June 13th, when the Ukraine flag would be installed for the week in reference to the Rotary Code request, and their event is on the 18th, so that flag would be flying during that event. And then on Monday, June 20th, install the Indigenous flag as referenced for a week, ending on the 27th, at which time, unless another flag request were to come in, the new Jasper flag, which of course appears behind your worship right now, would then be flown for the first time on our own flagpole. So in essence, the proposal is pride flag would stay up till the 13th. Ukraine flag would then be installed until the 20th, when the Every Child Matters would be installed. The flag would be installed until the 27th, at which point we would revert to our Jasper, our new municipality of Jasper flag. of course, I'll answer any questions, but that's the proposed schedule that matches the requests in total.
Thank you for that. Mr. Reid, comments or questions from councillors? Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, to Mr. Reid, you mentioned the Ukrainian flag as of the 13th. I think there may be a request coming for that to maybe start on the 15th to coordinate with a ceremony with members from the Rotary Club to be in attendance, unless you've got a separate correspondence. I think that's probably going to be discussed tonight, as that coincides with another meeting, and it would be very convenient to have mayor, council, and representatives to be there to do that. Totally consistent with what you're proposing, and I agree with, and it's just a matter of moving one flag a couple of days down the road and keeping another one up.
Certainly, Your Worship, through to Councillor Melnick, this is a suggestion, not in any way a demand. I think you would feel free to adjust as you see fit. We have not received that clarity as of yet.
Yeah.
For clarity, Mr. Reid, are we restricted to the flagpole that typically carries the municipal flag?
Your Worship, I don't have the policy memorized. I could check. However, I believe that is, my recollection is that that's correct. We do leave the Canadian and the Albertan flag up, and that our flag is the one that we are empowered to change as often as we would like.
I asked just because I think there are some laws or regulatory behavior beyond municipal bylaws that govern that. So I just wanted to confirm we're speaking only of one of three flagpoles that we maintain, and it is the one that typically from which we fly the municipal flag. Well, subject to Councillor Melnick's note that maybe June 15th for the Ukrainian flag through the balance of that week, which would cover the 18th when the Rotary dinner is on. I think your plan is sensible, meets the objectives and meets, if not quite the exact expectations, the general expectations of the groups who are interested in having a flag flown. So if there was a councillor prepared to make a motion to that effect, and that I think would be in order, I would certainly support it. Councillor Demota.
I would support a motion that would concern all those in that effect.
As
I'm not trying to make fun of it.
Your Worship, I could certainly recite the dates as I understand them, if that helps to make the motion.
So far, we have two people in support of a motion that has not yet been made.
The dates, as I understand them, is the pride flag would stay up until June 15th, when the Ukraine flag, in support of the Rotary Club request, would fly. Proposed until the 20th, when the appropriate Indigenous flag would fly, commemorating the 21st as National Indigenous Day, so that date is likely most appropriate. And then on the 27th, we would install the municipality flag.
Thank you for that, Mr. Reid. Councillor Melvin.
For the purposes of these three items and taking care of the points regarding the flags, I would make the motion that parallels the flying of the flags to the dates that Mr. Reid has suggested, and that then we go back to each. Well, that's a motion to resolve the flags.
Yes, understood. All right, any further debate on that motion? So restricted to the flying of flags and the order and the dates. I will call a question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Reid, for that wise approach, accommodating a variety of interests. That takes us back then to agenda item 7.3, because there are additional requests in that letter or email we have received from or on behalf of Jasper. Councillor Melman.
For the purposes of starting discussion, through you to Mr. Reid, the two requests that I see remaining is to, the first one is very straightforward, is to paint the existing crosswalk. And that I think was probably being planned anyway, which leaves us with one more request, which would be something that we could address this year, is the additional sidewalks that would be painted to complete a route, I think, to go from Patricia to Connaught. Is that the intention in that area? And then, of course, the request for the flowers would be something for planning for next year.
Your Worship, if I may, for Councillor Melnick, the request does contain there are a number of different requests contained in the letter. A course of action could be to refer this item to administration for appropriate follow-up. We have the benefit now of policy. We have the benefit now of a policy that describes in what situation we need formalized agreements. This would be a good chance to use that policy and just for administration to maybe get a little bit of a run through with it. Say, okay, we've got a kind of a complex request for a few different things. Let's have a look at that, see if we can assess what meets what sort of thresholds. But certainly the right outlet for the community to make that first request is to council. Council can either choose to approve the request however you like, but we certainly do have a policy that allows you to refer it back to administration. We can deal with it accordingly, according to the policy. And if there is something that the policy suggests needs to come back to council for approval, we could do that. If it is within administration's authority to act on this, and we don't have any questions, then we could simply do so as well. So I think referring it to administration might be the right course of action.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Councillor Melman.
And in the spirit of what you're suggesting, I think that'll also cover one of the points mentioned in item 7.4 regarding waiving fees for the hall, which would then leave only one other request I see in 7.4, which would be a representative, which is totally administration also, approaching the mayor or the mayor or a representative council being there. So really, from this point, this becomes, each one can be referred to administration, given our new policy.
Your Worship, other than the request for proclamation for the from the Rotary Club, that would be the other one that continues to be council's exclusive.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Melnick, are you contemplating a motion?
I think for clarity, I would like to make the motion that the council, I want to make sure I get this right, council approve the request for a proclamation for the Ukrainian, for the Rotary Club of Jasper, declaring that the municipality of Jasper is a welcoming community, and to recognize that we're welcoming these new residents to Jasper.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion, debate about that motion, which is to proclaim a welcome to Ukrainian newcomers to our community? I will speak in favor of the motion. I certainly support that. The latest figure that I think I received was 66 Ukrainian newcomers arrived in our community, which seems to be phenomenal for a community this size. It's great for them, I hope, equally great for our community to have them here. So I very much support it and welcome this opportunity that has been presented by the Rotary Club to make this proclamation. I really do appreciate it. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I also support the motion. I think it should be said that Nancy Addison has done a ton of work to bring these Ukrainians here, and I just want to go on record and say that I think that's amazing.
If there is nothing else, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. I'm trying to say I do so proclaim, but it's difficult to do without reading the entire proclamation. So we have so proclaimed, and I will sign the proclamation if it is available later today. That still leaves some outstanding issues. And I thought before you came forward with the proclamation motion, Councillor Melnick, that you were thinking of a motion to refer the other requests to administration. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would like to make that motion for the request from Mr. Ormandy out of Jasper. I support this. I think that the Uplift Festival has shown us that we can really make pretty things out of alleys, and it doesn't seem that this has any financial impact on municipality directly. Is that the case?
Your worship, through to Councillor Hall, at this time, the intention is that our support is purely going to be in staffing, barricading, those sorts of things. They have the paint prepared to be donated, and they will be performing the work themselves. Well, coordinating the work themselves.
So there's a motion to refer the request from out Jasper to administration. Is there embedded in that any expectation of a return? Typically, crosswalks are painted in or about June, so it shouldn't languish, but I don't know when administration might be able to come back.
If I may, your worship, the answer to that question is in the policy. We will apply the policy as CEO given indicated. We'll be applying the policy should the value of the work, either work or monetary constraints, should that value rise to the level of over $2,000, it would come back to this table. However, the expectation in this case is that it likely wouldn't. Those crosswalks would just get painted as and when possible. Knowing that there's support on council certainly makes it quicker for administration to go forward with this, but you wouldn't see this one again.
Thank you for that, Councillor Waxer, and then Councillor Demoto.
Would that include the flowers too for next year?
Your worship, through to Councillor Waxer, the short answer is yes, but it wouldn't occur. That discussion wouldn't really occur till next year. But yes, it would. The policy would apply to the flowers, and when we have this much notice, we won't previously order or previously plan differently, which we'd already done for this summer. So yes, it will. The flowers will be accommodated next year.
Thank you. Just didn't want to see that get lost.
Councillor Demoto.
Well, just for clarity, the reason it's here today is that I think it has a lot of social ramifications as well as political, in some ways. So I'm very much support of this. But at the same time, do we need to, is there a motion on the table right now to recommend or direct administration?
Councillor Hall's
Okay.
motion
I wasn't clear.
to refer it to that. Sorry, Mr. Given, but just while I have the thought in my head, and I'll return to you. Under the template that we have just approved for relationships with external groups, council approval is required. Well, again, it depends whether this is an ongoing or a one-off. I guess it's a one-off because it's annual. So council approval is not required. So are we approving anything if we refer the matter to administration? Mr. Given?
Your worship, you can see the complexity of these requests and why on sort of first receipt, it can be useful to refer to administration, which really empowers us to have the discussion with the organizer and say, okay, what is it that you're really looking for, and to get a better understanding? And do we have any existing policies that might guide us on this or might impact any decision related to this? Obviously, there's the new relationship with external groups policy, which we're all talking about, but we also do have a policy on non-standard crosswalks that administration would also want to have an opportunity to take into account. And then, it appears that there is a concept here about a permanent determination about that alley, or sort of recognition of that alley space, which I think is something that probably administration would want to understand a little bit more. And if we're talking about a permanent designation for a certain space in the municipality, that would be something we would bring back to council. And so there are a couple of different layers of requests here. I think the referral back to administration says, we would like you to look into this, support what you can, and is within your scope of authority today. And we would imagine that certainly during Pride Month, sprucing up the existing crosswalk in accordance with the policy that already exists is something that would be within administration's authority. There are a few other things here that, as we get to understand a little bit more, we might need to come back to council for further approvals on. But I think we would want to have that conversation with Mr. Ormsby and just get a really sort of clarity about what it is he was intending hoping, and then we can inform council about any policies or bylaws or other considerations that might impact that.
Thank you for that. Any other debate on the motion? If there's not, then I will call a question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. I think then that concludes those three pieces of correspondence. We need not return to the matter of the Rotary Club. All of those items are dealt with. I think we passed the proclamation by motion, and with respect to the Indigenous flag, we have in the former motion incorporated the dates on which it can be raised. Not missing anything on it. That's all of the requests that came forward. All right. See a thumbs up from Mr. Reid. Nothing could be more comforting. Covered it all. All right, that takes us to other new business. Councillor Nunley,
Did we vote on that? Did we have a motion that we needed to vote on?
I called the question on referring.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead again.
You voted in favor. Just.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have covered each aspect of all three of those. So again, agenda item 8, other new business. Is there any other new business for councillors to bring to the attention of councillors? If not, I will turn to agenda item 9, the motion action list. Councillor Melman.
Earlier in the meeting, I made reference to the discretionary use permit terms of reference, and I do see it here, so thank you for capturing that. And I just wanted to make note my error on that, and unless there are other changes that need to be spoken to, that's a very good thing.
If there is nothing else on the motion action list, we can turn to agenda item 10, councillor reports. Are there reports from our busy councillors to let us know what they've been up to? Councillor Keller-Harempi.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I attended Community Futures Board meeting by Zoom on May 27th. Just a reminder that on June 23rd is the annual general meeting for Community Futures. There'll be a board meeting that morning, but in the afternoon at 2 p.m. all of council is invited to attend the annual general meeting at Bill. Councillor Demoda will be there, and Councillor Wilson will be attending my absence because I'm away that day. Also, just a reminder that on June 18th is Lemonade Day. We have 20 entries so far. And on Tuesday, June 14th, Mayor Ireland and Councillor Demoda and I at 4 o'clock will attend as part of the judging for that event. And at the Robson House, so all 20 entries will come. We'll have a lot of lemonade to drink that day. And also remember it's Seniors Week this week. So there's a lot of events happening at Alpine Summit. And on Thursday at 2 o'clock is the 50s Soda Shop dress up event. And any members of council that would like to come, you're welcome to join us that day. Also on Friday, the Rotary Club is putting on a luncheon of lobster for the seniors. And tomorrow night, the seniors are going to Hinton to Mamma Mia. So it's been yesterday night rafting. I went to the Alpine Summit yesterday with all the seniors at lunch. Very exciting week ahead. So I hope to see some Councillor Birch join us.
Thank you for that, Councillor Keller-Harempi. Can you just confirm 4 o'clock on the 14th is the judging? Thank you for that. Other reports? Councillor Waxer.
Councillor Melnick and I traveled this weekend to Tabor to attend the Alberta Japan Twin Municipalities Association. And it was the first in-person conference that's happened since 2019. We had the Consul General of Japan in Calgary in attendance, and he spoke very eloquently on the importance of cultural understanding. We had several entertainment, including the opening of the sake barrel. We had we had drumming and dancing, and it was a very well put together conference. There's a lot of attention to detail. The food served on the reception reflected the friendship between Canada and Japan, and the town of Tabor, with corn appearing throughout the menu. So we learned a great deal, and I will submit a written report next week with some of the thoughts that we had around enhancing our twinning relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any other reports? Councillor DeMora?
Not a report, I'm just wondering where the rest of the sake left.
Councillor Melnick?
Candies, I want sake.
There wasn't sake for everybody. Other reports, I had the pleasure of being in Edmonton with Mr. Given for the Travel Industry of Alberta, the Travel Industry Association of Alberta Advocacy Day. And we both attended sessions where we had presentations by the Travel Alberta, as well as an opportunity for the official opposition to make presentations to the individuals in the room, as well as a opportunity for the Premier to speak the following morning in the last part of the conference. And just to indicate, tourism is very much top of mind for both parties, the NDP and the government. There may be some activity this summer with the NDP looking to produce a white paper on initiatives in the tourism industry across the province to be able to, what they could do to jumpstart tourism. And the Premier spoke, I think, quite well regarding the effect that tourism has and how quickly getting our tourism sector back to where it was, how positive it'll affect the province. And of other note, our MLA was given recognition not only by the conference but also by the Premier for Martin Long's work during the COVID period in advocating for the tourism industry. And I think it's appropriate that we recognize his efforts here. And Mr. Given, if there's anything else you'd like to add, I think you've had some other meetings that were as well going to be beneficial for the community.
Your Worship, it was a pleasure to attend and represent the municipality along with Councillor Melnick. A great opportunity to talk to Travel Alberta representatives, including the CEO, David Goldstein, and meet other people who have been involved in planning and development matters in other resort municipalities, both in British Columbia and Alberta, and some good dialogue and discussion with them about what that might look like for Jasper. As well as discussion with the manager of the Tourism Recovery Fund, the Prairies Can Fund that has been set up to support enhancements to tourism-related activities. And so a range of good conversations. I think it was, I was happy to be able to go and join Councillor Melnick in attending there. And I could certainly see value in council regularly attending that event if the association continues it.
Thank you for that. I can report that on May 25th, which seems a long time ago, but we haven't had a meeting for a while, I attended the Jasper Partnership Initiative meeting with Mr. Given, and various matters were discussed, including the PHA issue, which was live then, but since the status has changed. But there was also discussion focused on housing generally in the community and the workforce, combined issue of a lack of workers and a lack of housing. And there was also a rather long discussion about transportation options, and in our motion action list, you'll see that transportation matters coming back to council in July. So the group, as diverse as it is, shares a common interest in a number of those same issues. I used that occasion to mention as well that I had been invited and did attend virtually a meeting with the mayor of the village of Valemont and representatives, particularly of the Kemp First Nation. And there is a real interest in redeveloping the Valemont airport, which could have real tourism and economic repercussions to Jasper. So at this time, they're firstly looking at possibility of hiring a consultant to help build a business case for an expanded airport. What they're looking at is both a lengthening and a widening of the runway to accommodate a 737. They're not looking at this time at any particular carrier, but they want to know what would need to be done to get that airport into that sort of configuration. So it's interesting work, and it's just starting off. So it's useful, I think, to be on the ground floor. There's no expectation of any commitment other than support from Jasper at the time being. I'll carry these discussions on with representatives from Tourism Jasper and the Chamber as well. But just so you know, that is an initiative in Valemont that may impact Jasper. Connected with that, I had some discussions with the mayor of Valemont and passed this on to our representatives on the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association, which has its annual general meeting next month, I think, and motions are due to be submitted by tomorrow. And one of those motions, which Councillor Melnick, I know, is up to speed on, and which Valemont is presenting and looking for support, is upgrades to passing lanes on Highway 16 west of Jasper National Park. So again, something that matters to our tourism industry. So those things are all going on, and I will let you know when I get invited to another meeting with respect to the Valemont Airport. But it's a long-term project. And I think those are my items to report. Councillor DeMoto.
Well, I apologize. Traditionally, mayor speaks last, but I realized that I hadn't reported on our annual general meeting for the Jasper Community Team Society. It was less than 2 weeks ago, but it seemed like a long time ago. And looking back, I noticed that I did an April report, but not May. So we had our annual general meeting here on the evening of the 26th. So we went through the regular AGM stuff, electing officers, looking over financials. We welcomed Councillor Waxer as an ex officio member to the team, which is quite exciting for us. There's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of heart to it. That's what has been put into that particular area. So I think everyone is quite excited. And is. So welcome back, Kathleen. And Mr. Reed was there as well, representing the municipality. It was a great evening. Our keynote speaker was Joe Uri, and he came down to speak of his book, Coyote Takes a Walk, and left the discussions pretty broad. And we had a Q&A on reconciliation after, and it was quite lengthy, but very informative. And yeah, it was well worth a listen. And I recommend if Joe, to anybody who wants to have him come and speak if he's got the time. And I also plug his book. Just, I think it's worth a read, especially now that it's June.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. If there are no other council reports, agenda item 11, upcoming events. There's a next Wednesday, I presume that is. Location to be determined, unless somebody knows where that might be. Maybe not. The Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce annual general meeting, June 21st. Do we know when and where? Somewhere in the community will be. And the Canada Day breakfast and celebrations on July 1st. Are there any other upcoming events to inform council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just, for the record, would like to note that we do have the Rotary Welcomes Ukraine dinner on Saturday, the 18th at the multipurpose hall. And hopefully we'll have a great attendance and we'll be able to generate some funds for our new residents here as they settle in the community.
Councillor Kelleher.
Also, we could add Lemonade Day, Saturday the 18th also. It will start in noon, I believe, in town, and we'll have stalls up throughout the town, and this should be great.
And for additional information, and I think that the email I received was an invitation to all of councillors, if I can find it, but there is one graduate of École de Rocher this year, and that graduation ceremony is going to be held June 24th at 2 p.m. in the gymnasium auditorium of the new high school. And I believe that all councillors are welcome to that. And I have been invited as well to speak at graduation for Jasper Senior High School on the 29th. That's 1 o'clock. And now that my own travel plans have changed, I will be available for both of those and available for pancake duty on July 1st. But I don't know anything yet about a horse in the parade. We'll come that. Is there anything else to bring to the attention of council? If not, it's not yet 3 o'clock, and I would invite a motion to adjourn. Councillor Melnick, are there any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you to members of the public who were tuned in. Always a pleasure to have members of the community watching the proceedings of council. And remember that it is National Indigenous History Month. So avail yourselves of opportunity to learn the history of the local area from an Indigenous perspective. Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks.